I would like to welcome Hamid Khan, and right after that we are going to go into question and answer period where everybody will be able to have an active discussion.
Greetings everybody, just in typical Assad's fashion, just kind of put something on you and I wouldn't even let you know I was supposed to speak or anything. I'll just be very brief and thank you very much for this opportunity. And I was thinking how we could probably, everything that has been said, how do we shift the dialogue? And if maybe the title of the talk would be the fight between the crescent and the cross. Because one thing that continues to not be mentioned is the role of faith and the role of religion and how that has created for hundreds of years this tension that continues between the West and the rest, as it has been called. But the other thing I would also like for us to think about that is that when we talk about military dictatorships and we talk about feudalism, I think as a grassroots activist who sees the impact on our communities, is the sheer displacement of our communities, whether it's mass migration that results all over the world, or whether it's the displacement of people in our own countries, where the requisition of land, the ownership of land, the requisition of resources, reinvestment in the economy, creating opportunities, resulting in the mass displacement of people. So that's something that we need to be discussing more and more. We talk about the role of the Pakistani military, and I think if we could just do a little bit more of a chronology, that during the time of the Baghdad Pact in 1958, when that was signed, it was also ascertained that the Pakistani military was one of the cheapest forces to protect the interest of Standard Oil and to protect the oil interest in the Middle East, outside of all the Western forces, where when they, and I don't exactly remember the dollar figure, that per day, what would be the cost to maintain and alert and maintain and bringing the Pakistani army to protect the oil interest in the Middle East. It was also talked about the role and the relationship with China and the relationship with the US. I mean, I think this also happens when you are, I mean, we all live a schizophrenic life, but when an official policy is so schizophrenic, where on one hand you are reaching out to China, but on the other hand you have Baraber and Peshawar, the air base, where, which the US had always access to, and where all the spy planes and everything else. And if you all remember, to the extent of the role of Pakistan, that when, what was his name, Gary Powers. When Gary Powers was shot down, Gary Powers was the pilot of the U-2 airplane that was shot down near Khrushchev sign with the Soviet Union, which led to a lot of tension, and remember what happened in the UN and all. Gary Powers took off from Baraber, from Peshawar. So that whole U-2 flight, so Pakistan's interest was right there. And then the presence of CIA officers who were there as a part of lecturing at the staff college, and we have some ex-military people over here as well, so they may be able to comment more on that. But the staff college in Pakistan is a location which is in Quetta, in Balochistan, where once you are going to get a star or you become a general, you go through the staff college, and then for the longest time, a CIA person was assigned to the staff college, and the whole orientation would take place as well. So I think we're looking at this sort of, again, this existence where we're trying to play all these games. But it again the question really comes back to this, that why has it continued to flourish? What is it in our own imagination when we think of the Pakistani military person as the Islam ka Sipahi? I think that's where we need to really push for it and dig a little deeper. And Islam ka, I don't know if you translate that to you in English. And for the soldier of God, then what does it really mean? I mean, I grew up in Pakistan, and this was always the message, that Islam ka Sipahi. So it is again deep down the role of faith. Where does it come to? The whole fight between the crescent and the cross. What were the Crusaders thinking at that time? And I think this is the kind of the analysis that we need to bring in. But it's also very interesting too that right now what is happening is that an Islam ka Sipahi is fighting an Islam ka Sipahi. So when we talk about the Taliban or the terrorists, when they show up, they say Allahu Akbar. Well, the Pakistani army guy says Allahu Akbar, war, so who's going to shoot who? And when we see, people surrendering, what is going on over there? What kind of exchange is taking place for both people who are ready to kill each other, who have grown up to protect the faith, not protect the people. Protect the faith, they are the protectors of the faith. So Allahu Akbar runs very deep in those minds. So obviously people will surrender. Obviously you'll have 300 people willingly surrendering their homes to the people too. And the last thing I want to say as well is that, while we are concerned about these things, but globally, there are a lot of resistance movements. And not for a second to be seen who supports what was mentioned about homophobia and gender violence and everything else that's propagated by the Taliban. But if we look at it, if there is a resistance to the West, well, if there is, and I don't want to make that into a grassroots movement, I don't want to romanticize that, but can we look at that as a resistance movement as well? And globally, there are resistance movements going on. Whether it's a non-violent resistance movement in Venezuela, whether there's a non-violent resistance movement in Bolivia, or whether there's a violent resistance movement in Iraq, or it's happening in Afghanistan, or it's happening in Pakistan, the resistance is taking place. So I think we need to really incorporate these things when we are having these conversations, that where did it come from, why does it continue to flourish, and how do we move forward, not just by looking at it from the outside. And the last thing, again, being that what does modernity really mean? I mean, does it mean sitting in a fancy hotel like this and having these conversations versus sitting under a tree and people, because for thousands of years, people have been having these conversations. It didn't have to be in air-conditioning rooms. And people have come together, people have organized. And this is what we would all, as now put a pitch in for South Asian Network, that that's the work that we do, to create a space for people to come together. Because as one of the speakers was saying, there is a very deeply embedded political consciousness in our communities. And how do we translate that into our communities? Regardless of which political spectrum you come from, whether it's the Maoist in Nepali, whether it's the Tamil in Sri Lanka, whether it was the liberation of Bangladesh against the genocide that was committed, or whether it was going on in the resistance movement, or whether it was the South Indians who raised their voices against, imposing language on them. These are deeply embedded political consciousness, and that's the challenge that we have. And how do we bring that here as a community, when now all we see is hope and one person named Obama, who has supported war, who is out there, and this is really twisted. So I think that's the challenge that we all have as a community. So I just want to light up some fire. Thank you.